Saccade, written by Michael Cisco, narrated by Edward E. French. Listen to me. You are blind. You don't think you're blind. I'm not speaking metaphorically. You, like most of mankind, are physically blind to certain visual stimuli. Yes, ultraviolet, infrared, these are colors we can't see, but then there's also saccadic blindness. Your eyes are not fixed in a mannequin stare. They're constantly in motion. Even, I would say especially, when they are focused on one particular object. Stare at anything, no matter how steadily, how intently, and your eyes will still not quite freeze in place. To look attentively at an object, it is necessary for the eyes to make countless little adjustments. The name for an adjustment of the position of the eye is saccade. That's how it always is, you eventually came to realize. Here in the city's heart, you know nothing, and you're basically happy to, as if you think your own little semi-willful ignorance protects you from having to worry about the bugs in the walls, as opposed to the ones which occasionally crawl out of the drain. The man who might be slowly losing his mind behind that door across the way, as opposed to the very obviously crazy guy who capers each morning on the corner of your street. Not to mention whether that cheerfully drunk lady in the unit to your right, who you see fumble with her keys every evening, will doze off one night with a lit cigarette in her hand and burn the whole fucking building down. You're familiar with what they call shaky cam? It refers to a type of cinematography. A handheld camera is employed to give the audience a greater sense of immersion in the scene. The motion of the camera is intended to mimic the motion of the head and eye of a participant or near witness. Watching a film shot in this manner can be disorienting, even nauseating. Perhaps you know what I mean. But why should that be? Look around. Look at my hand. Look at the wall, those pipes. Look at them, the toolbox, the workbench. Well, perhaps the custodian's closet isn't the best place for this experiment, at least not the best lighting, but you see what I mean. As you shifted your eye from one thing to another, from one side of your field of vision to another and then back, and as your eye focused itself on near things and then on more distant things, did you get queasy? Did any of that make you feel sick? Dizzy? Of course not. And yet, if you were to reproduce the same sequence of eye and head motions that you just performed using a camera, the scene as filmed would be instantly recognizable as a shaky cam-style scene, and the viewer might well complain of disorientation or nausea if the sequence were extended long enough. Would you become nauseous if I continued to ask you to look now at this, now at that? What's the difference, then? Why should shaky cam footage be sickening to a viewer whose own vision is constantly shifting its perspective, darting from object to object? The difference is that human beings, and indeed most animals, are you listening? This is important. I'm telling you about something that your brain is doing without your being aware of it. This is scientifically proven fact. Your brain is editing the visual information fed into it by your optic nerve, and the effect of this editing is something technically known as saccadic blindness. That's not psychotic, but saccadic, spelled S-A-C-A-D-I-C. Basically, your brain suppresses information that comes along the optic nerve whenever the eye makes a saccade. The camera and the optic nerve both register everything that happens within their field of sensitivity. So, when you watch the shaky cam footage, you will see the image streaking when the camera moves. Your own vision also streaks whenever your eye makes a saccade, but your brain interrupts the signal to prevent the streak from registering. This is why you are able to look around, to focus now on this object, now on that, without becoming queasy or disoriented. Try it. Look around. You should notice a blip in your vision whenever you transfer your attention from one thing to another. The blip is more pronounced as the movement of the eye becomes greater. Go ahead, look at my hand. And now look over there, at the faucet. You see? You probably noticed a bit of a streak. But did you see how it cut off almost the moment it started? The way the streak didn't carry all the way over from my hand to the faucet. Your vision started to streak, but then suddenly you were looking at the faucet, and you can't recall or visualize clearly what your eyes saw on the way from the one object to the other. That's saccadic blindness. Your brain is actively suppressing what your eye sees when it moves. If it didn't, you would be as afflicted by simply looking around your environment as you are watching a shaky cam film. Shaky cam would be your entire life, just as it is mine. So, no, I'm not wearing these sunglasses because I fatuously think they make me look cool, whatever that means. And while they are a part of my disguise, they are actually necessary for me, even in here. You see how much I trust you? That I can tell you this, even though it means singling me out? I'm telling you directly about a condition that distinguishes me out of something like tens of millions of people. I was struck on the head by a bit of cinder block when I was 13. I'd been passing a construction site. Freak accident, or so they said. There was no brain damage. A miracle, the doctors said. They all said it. But then I lost most of my inborn saccadic blindness. It didn't cease altogether, but it became much weaker and irregular. At times my vision was almost what it had been before the accident, but most of the time I saw the streaking of things. At times there was no suppression at all. I could tell those times because my eyes always felt cold when the blindness was fully suspended. It happened without any obvious cause every so often, not quite every day. It was weird. Saccadic blindness. It's like the blindness is a kind of warm blanket that would just drop away altogether once in a while. I had to start wearing sunglasses, and I had to train myself to keep my head steady, to close my eyes whenever I turned my head, to try to maintain as much conscious control over my eye movements as possible. You understand? This is like trying to maintain constant conscious control over your breathing. Otherwise, if I allowed my eyes to swivel around as they had before the accident, I would have become incapacitated almost right away, like the worst motion sickness you ever had. I still take Dramamine every day. I know my effect is weird. I know you've noticed it. But now, at least, you know the reason. I'm not complaining. Though it has been hard and the accident more or less invalidated me for ordinary life, it also gave me true sight, however intermittently. It made me one of a handful of people on Earth who see everything that happens around them, not just what the eye may focus on. You can't imagine what that's like. You really have no idea what there is to see in the streaks. Even when you can see them with shaky cam, your brain fights the image, which is part of the reason you find it so disorienting. The nausea is part of it too, but that has more to do with your own unconscious aversion to the sights those streaks are threatening to show you, not just the physical effort of focusing the eyes. Didn't you ever wonder why something affecting your eyes would also make you feel like vomiting? Why would your vision have anything to do with your gastrointestinal tract? Food for thought, isn't it? I know you think I'm crazy and that I've corralled you here to rant at you about my problems. Hear me out altogether to the end, and then report me for a lunatic if you have to. Saccadic blindness is a thing, and I do not have it anymore. It is a scientifically verifiable fact that I can see things you can't under the usual conditions. If you're willing to examine my evidence, I can show you those things too. It took me a long time to understand what I was seeing. I'm thankful that the accident happened when it did. I was just old enough to be able to handle it. Well, I handled it with difficulty. There's a world of pain and fear behind that word, handling. But I did handle it, and I am handling it. And I can show it to you. Don't think I went to all this trouble just to harangue you. I can show you the evidence. I do have it. Don't worry. I'm not planning on cracking you over the head. A camera can show you everything you need to know once I teach you how to watch and what to look for. And you do need to know this. You need to have the maturity to face what it means to do the right thing, no matter how frightening all this is. And I know I've frightened you, and I'm sorry if I've had to. When you've seen it, all this will make sense. All of what you've seen. These are precautions you will understand the reason for soon, if you really pay attention and listen with an open mind. Can you do that? No. No. Now. Right now. I'm going to show you some writing samples. Here. Do any of these make sense to you? Do you recognize them? Are you looking closely, or are you just humoring me because you think I'm crazy? Well, perhaps I am crazy, but I'm not wrong. Do you know where these characters come from? These lines? You do know that these lines are from the very books you're teaching to your students. What about this one? You do know that this one is from one of your own articles, don't you? Didn't you write this part? The part in English? I assure you, you did. The phrase is here. See? Look. Is it there, or isn't it? Didn't you write this? You wrote this, but not this part, right? I know you think I'm crazy, but did I put these words there? You're telling the truth, or you're testing me. In either case, I should explain. Even if I am crazy, crazy people, being crazy doesn't make everything you say wrong, does it? Plenty of crazy people have made scientifically valid observations. There's nothing about being crazy that would invalidate careful scientific observations. And crazy people are the ones who see things differently. They see connections that aren't obvious, and they look in places where no one else would look. Maybe they see things that aren't there, but maybe they see things that are there. As I said, at 13 I acquired true sight. There was, understandably enough, a period of adjustment. Not only did I have trouble getting around, but worst of all, listen, I started to have difficulty reading. When you read, your saccadic blindness helps to suppress the minute streaking that takes place as your eyes scan down the lines of text. Since I no longer had the benefit of that suppression, I could barely read a page without developing a headache. I had to resort to audiobooks to complete my schooling, and my academic standing never did recover after that. Even learning Braille was no real help. I had some decrepitude for it, could barely understand it. In the end, I learned to shut my eyes as I moved from one word to the next. That was the best approximation I could come up with, and you wouldn't believe how tiring it is. Hundreds of blinks just to get through one page. I'm sure you can see how much trouble that would be. So I often didn't bother. I just read with my streaking vision and pushed through the best I could before the onset of the inevitable headache. That was how I came to make my great discovery. In certain books, not all, but in certain books, I began to notice additional writing that could only be seen when the motion of the eye causes the letters to streak. It's like bits of letters are incorporated, or partially incorporated, into the lettering of the text, so that you wouldn't notice them if you were reading normally. Only when the eye scans the line like a camera, without saccadic blindness, the streaking actually causes these hidden bits of letters to resolve into distinct characters. All these passages I've just shown you are taken from your assigned books and from your own writing. I can show you. See. The camera in the phone does not suppress anything it sees, just like the unedited feed from the optic nerve. As you move it over the text, watch the screen. See? There. That in there when you move it, that's a letter. See it? That's another there. And there, another one. These three that I've written down here. Here, I'll do it again. See them? Would they be so consistent, pass by pass, if they were only random distortions of the text? I mean, I'm not stupid. I realized at once that this could be just some, compulsive pattern-finding tendency of my brain, but these letters come out in the same places, the same way, every time. I mean, that is a letter A, isn't it? And that is a lowercase l there, right? You can even see that it isn't an uppercase I. And that's an O, not just some circle. The sides are thicker than the top and bottom. Now look here. That's an N. And there's the E. Exactly. Alone. It repeats over and over throughout the article. Now, did you do that? Of course not. Who's going to write the word alone secretly throughout a whole article dozens of times? But how could something this consistent, this coherent, come about by pure chance? But you know what's even weirder? It isn't consistent from one copy to the next. Like in this copy, there's nothing. At least I haven't been able to find anything. But in this one, you don't get this alone text. You get this. See, there's an L, an O, then an S, T, N, O, W, then L again, O again, S again, T. And that's it for the article. It says, lost, now, lost. Okay, yes, I thought that too. Like maybe there is some kind of uncontrolled digital bleed over between texts, like a computer hiccup, but that's the thing. These are printed lines, but I don't really believe that they were printed in the text when it came out. I bought all these brand new. They all came still in the shrink wrap. I checked them all, and there was no streak writing in any of them. Nothing. But now there is. I thought of that, too. I used different phones. I used cameras. I used video. I even did Super 8, and the results were consistent no matter what kind of device I used. My eyes, any camera, will give you the same reading, even on fresh antique videotape, even on fresh virgin film. So it's not in the printer itself, and it isn't in the machines, and it sure as hell isn't just in my head. And that leaves what? It is in the text, and it is placed there, printed on the page, there, after I bought it and opened it, right there in my house. My house is pretty isolated, you know, and I'm no slob. I don't leave books and things just lying around any old place where anybody could come along and mess with them. I'm very vigilant, but there's been no sign, just no sign at all, of anything out of the ordinary. I know you doubt me, right? This could all be some kind of hoax. I could have doctored the printing, whatever. But use your own phone or camera or whatever. Pick any text you like. Go ahead. You will start to find the hidden print, too. Am I going around tampering with every book in the world, every phone and camera? Or is someone else doing it? Well, I'm too much of a scientist, even if you think I'm crazy, to start jumping to conclusions. But I do have a hypothesis, if you want to hear it. Or are you humoring me? I don't think this is some kind of conspiracy. That is not to say that there might not be an element of conspiracy to it, and maybe these are coded messages or something, but even assuming the means presented themselves, who would try to communicate like this, through a few words scrambled across pages and pages of text? You only get a letter every couple of pages using this technique. Repeating alone 3 times took nearly 20 pages. I grant nobody would be likely to stumble across these messages, but surely anyone with clandestine business to transact is going to want a faster, more copious form of communication. Who would have time to flip through a whole 100-page book for a message that would be at most maybe 40 characters, a very short sentence? We have to look at the messages themselves for the answer. What do they say? Alone, alone, alone. Lost, now lost. Take a look at this one now. That's an H, an E, there's an L, and there's a P. Help. Help is the most common word in all these messages. It occurs in just over half of the ones I've found, although not in any version of your article that I've been able to check. Here, help, 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 help. And here, help, where is? This one says, help, us help. Cries for help, yes. I think this means that we are not alone. The conclusion is perhaps not inescapable, but really, I can't think of a better one. There are beings among us whose presence is unknown to us, unsensed, and they're leaving messages hidden in our own books. I don't know how they manage the printing, but perhaps they simply write in such a consistent way that it only looks like printing, or maybe they write using some kind of printing pens. This is all speculation. Writing like this, you would have to have a strong imagination so you could see the written phrase in your mind as it would appear translated into this streak writing. Then you might write each letter a little dot or strand at a time, distributed over several square inches of paper, knowing that when you streak your eyes over what you've written, the letter will resolve out. It's a bit like writing the letter A, starting with the first few bits of the left leg, then the upper, then the crosspiece, and so on. Each letter would have to be an exploded diagram of itself. We can postulate some sort of intelligent beings that leave each other messages, extended messages, using books. But see how strange their idiom is. Help where is, for example. It could be an incomplete sentence like, help, where is the exit? But I get the impression that it was intended to run, where is help? An interrogative, albeit a childish one. Or, lost, now lost. Is this part of a longer series of repeated words alternating lost and now, or is it a complete thought in abbreviated form? I am lost. Now I am really lost. Well, maybe not. It's a little like a child's way of speaking, or better, a sleep-talking adult. I wondered if it might be necessary to express thoughts telegraphically, very briefly, because the inscription process has to be done in furtive haste, or if it might be that the messages have to conform to the shapes of the letters and the length and layout of the text, the font also probably, and that restricts the range of possible messages. Then there is the question of whoever these messages could be meant for, and how these readers find the opportunity to scan the messages once they're written. I haven't found any outward markings in the books or journals that would single them out, so is someone habitually skimming through all our books? Did they approach me specifically, knowing I was more likely to notice the writing? You know, it only just occurred to me, how stupid I am, that they are most certainly writing messages all over, but that it's not really so feasible even for me to see anything apart from what they insert into books. If their messages are scattered, let's say over billboards and street signs or all over the buildings lining the highway, they might be too small for someone like me to see while passing at the right speed, or it may be that their messages are too big for me to see. I might have to drive for miles to put together even one letter. I've tried finding messages in films, but you almost never get a long enough shot to get much more than a partial character, or maybe half a word. It's books that provide the best chance for finding something. And even then, you have to string several books together in the right order to get a phrase. Maybe 20 books to make a sentence of any complexity. They must have some way of marking the books to ensure that they are read in the correct order. But I haven't found anything like that yet. What does it mean, though? That's what I wanted to ask you. I have my theory, and I wanted to ask you about it first. I have a feeling that this is not unrelated to automatic writing or ghost writing. I'm not saying that ghosts are writing messages in books or wherever. I don't think. Actually, I wonder if it isn't somehow the books themselves. The writing? I mean, I know it doesn't make sense, but writing is more than a record, isn't it? It sounds stupid now that I say it aloud, but I can't help feeling that the writing is conscious on its own in some way, or relaying information. I don't know. What do you think? Well, first of all, thank you for reaching out to me. I'm happy to discuss this with you. I would have preferred to meet with you in a less alarming, drastic sort of way, but you aren't wrong to want to be discreet about this. This is a very, very serious problem. Now, I don't think that you've discovered the traces of people who have fallen out of reality or any sort of warning from beyond. They have the appearance of cries for help or of attempts to warn us of something, reaching, so to speak, through the static curtain of everyday writing. But we know that appearances may be deceiving. Naturally, being human, It is our impulse to give help when help is asked for, and there is a special horror surrounding the image of someone perishing, calling to someone who can't or won't respond, or perhaps doesn't hear. And of course, sometimes people choose not to help. Selfishness, perhaps, might be the motive, but then sometimes people are too intimidated to help, or cannot help without exposing themselves to punishment, to the same fate, likely enough, as the person who is calling to them. I also have to assure you that it is quite impossible for writing to somehow come to life, no matter how closely linked thinking and language may be, no matter how closely writing and memory are linked together, no matter how autonomously language may behave independently of personal human will. A person is granted a kind of linguistic elemental, a sort of machine made of several different kinds of processes, which will all involve language that is fixed in ways that resemble writing. But there is no ground whatever for thinking that language might also spontaneously form persons, or, for that matter, edit or even delete persons, leaving behind, in some cases, some fragments of language. You see how your theory blurs the lines dividing the human person from the operations of human language? If we were to take this theory to its logical conclusion, then that could mean that the language we're using right now, this moment, is not even a human language at all, that the idea of a human language is a kind of solecism. And if it isn't human, that is, not a human creation, but on the contrary, the thing that creates human beings, at least as persons. Well, where would that idea lead us? You're entirely right there. We don't discard ideas simply because they point us in disquieting directions. That would be a betrayal of our academic responsibilities in most cases. I think, though, you may have overlooked something. It's understandable, since this idea of yours would point toward a universal emergency, if it were true. But consider that, according to you, the messages you found were deliberately concealed. So then, you have any way of accounting for that? I mean, who hid them? And why? If your theory were correct, then it would follow that a conscious language that hides such messages might be unable to prevent them from leaking out into print. Let's say, in the same way that, an arsonist can't direct where the smoke from his fire will go. Every act leaves traces behind, even the act of erasing traces. That's physics, you must agree. Are you okay? You look a little peaked. Don't you think you should sit down? There. Any better? I'll go get someone in a moment if you need me to. Should I call someone for you? No? Well, I don't know when I'll have another opportunity to talk with you, so if you don't mind, I'd like to finish what I was saying. It won't take long. I want you to understand that I take what you're saying very seriously. And thank you again for bringing it to my attention. You're one of a very, very small number of people who would be likely to discover such messages, if all this were true. But you see, if your idea were true, then it would follow that language itself would want to keep its secrets, and so anyone who might make such a discovery as this, which I again assure you is really not what you think it is, but probably just an unusual series of typos or misprints or something, but anyone who might make such a discovery of this type in a universe where your theory is true would be liable to deletion by language. I mean, someone may continue to exist in a sense, or literally in a sensory manner, but without a name, without a being, without any of the fixity that language alone can establish in the discursive construct that we call reality. That person is essentially lost. But are you all right? You see, we don't live in that universe. Not at all. We can speculate freely about whatever we like, even to the extent of speculating about this particular fact of language, provided that speculating is all we are doing. If we start to believe it, well, So, remember that language is not conscious. Just because it has the power to create people doesn't mean that it has the power to delete people. It may feel like that is true. It may seem to be true. You may have what you consider to be very compelling evidence to believe it to be true. You may even experience something of that truth in yourself. A kind of emptying out of the self, maybe. Or feeling like you're disappearing. Are you all right? Just so. I am going to leave you now. I'm sorry, but I don't think I can stay with you. That is, I don't want to see. I don't want to see when there is nothing to see. There is nothing to see. I am alone. I've been alone all day. I've spoken to no one. No one has said anything to me. I've always had a tendency to daydream nonsense. Pure nonsense, really nothing more than mental static. A way of keeping the pilot light of my drabby, ordinary mind from going out. I've spoken to no one. I am alone, alone. I have spoken to no one.